I think we're starting to welcome lots of people from different places around the world. I'm seeing Georgia, Russia, Rome, Portugal. I missed a few at the beginning. Argentina, Lima, wow, Mexico, Milan, Jakarta. It's fantastic to see so many people coming in from around the world. And as we get started, I'll just say, keep going in the chat, because as we go through, it will be great to see your comments and your observations. And sometimes we'll ask you to say something in the chat. If you have a question, put the question in the Q&A. So comments in the chat, questions in the Q&A. I'm going to repeat that in a few more times, but that's just for your information. Great. Lovely to see everybody coming from all corners of the world. Hola from Cadiz. I know Cadiz. From Brazil, Sicily. Fantastic to see you. We're just giving it a few moments for people to arrive. And I think we're also going to be watching a video just to get things started.
A new approach in the way cities are designed and use energy.
Oh my God.
In which, you know, the plastic is totally integrated into the soil.
I'm going to show them how much water it could take to grow the cotton in their shopping bags.
So why does palm oil have such a bad reputation? Despite being so productive, the main reason is deforestation.
Great. Okay, I hope you could see that video well, and you will have a chance to see it again, not on Zoom, when it will probably show a little bit better. Thank you, everybody, for your greetings in the chat box. My name is Jane Forrest, and I am delighted to welcome you to this Pearson and BBC Studios event, all around the topic of sustainability. Whether you're a language learner, or maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're involved in education in other ways, or maybe you're just a communicator and you want to be part of this, I'm sure you'll agree, communication really can change the world. And today we're going to be focusing on the theme of sustainability. And we know that there are small steps that we can take towards sustainability, and there are big impacts that we can make as well. As everybody's very active in the chats, and I know on Facebook as well, I'm welcoming you on both Zoom and Facebook. Let's just think about those small steps that we take. I think in the past, I'll give you an example about myself. In the past, we used to print out all the paperwork for events. I would print out the PowerPoint, print out the running order, print out my notes, everything on paper. Don't do that anymore, because I'm mindful of those environmental issues. Maybe you can say something yourself in the chat about what you do, or maybe what you don't do now because of sustainability objectives. Lots of greetings coming through. Let's have a few comments about your small steps. What do you do when you're thinking about the environment? Might be saving water, might be saving paper, like I'm trying to do, no more paper, reducing paper in the classroom, that has a big impact. Distributing, separating out your rubbish or your trash. Clothes recycling is a big one. Bringing your own grocery bags. We have to do that in the UK now, where I am, no more grocery bags. water and paper, printing out less for students. If all teachers around the world are doing that, that must be a massive, massive saving from 10 or 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. Tests online, recycling. There are so many different things. And these are all small steps, but they are significant steps that we take, aren't they? And lots of us, I can see from the chat, are in an education environment. And we know that around the world, again, this is something that you might say in the chat too, around the world, education systems and frameworks are all changing and being developed to build in education for sustainability. That might be something that comes into the education system where you're working or where you're studying or where perhaps your children are studying. That's interesting to know that around the world, all of these things are happening. So in the spirit, and we're mainly involved, not all, but mainly involved in language education. So let's just have a look. Language education is our thing. I think we have a slide here. In the spirit of speaking together, this idea about communicating, about making bigger impacts with those small steps. Yeah, I'm just going to go for this first because a definition would be useful. This is a definition from UNESCO. Sustainability is a paradigm for thinking about the future in which environmental, societal, and economic considerations are balanced in the pursuit of an improved quality of life. So lots of the things that you're saying in the chat and that we're thinking about relating especially to the environment. But of course, also there's societal and economic considerations there. So let's take a look now, again, as I was saying, many of us involved in language communication, language education, think about how we learn and think about how this world of education that many of us belong to can have a real impact. When we're learning a language or teaching a language, we're getting access to knowledge. And we're also gaining skills. We might be gaining, if we're learning a language, we're learning vocabulary, we're learning how to express ourselves so we can get a better academic future, maybe career prospects and social roles. It also means that we can influence and we can be part of our communities and we can speak out. We can speak out on social issues and really be part of our community. So this cadence that we're talking about in this slide is really where we're going with this event that we're in today and also the rest of the programme that we'll be talking about later on in this event. Some questions in the chat box. The extended definition is from UNESCO. So do take a look at UNESCO's website if you want to find out what they have to say about sustainability goals. Also, questions, we can take our questions to the question and answer box here in Zoom, and also to the questions to the chat in Facebook, if you're on Facebook. Right, so looking at how we learn, this is really where we come together. This is an event where we come together as Pearson, world's education company, and also as BBC Studios, so important in that communication around the world using the English language. We're proud to partner. I'm from Pearson English. We're proud to partner with BBC Studios. And I'd like to welcome our guests. Erica Webb-Hughes is from Pearson and Praveen Gopalan is from BBC Studios. Great to have you here with us. And I'm going to remind people again, as Erica and Praveen speak to us, they will be saying interesting stuff and you may very well have a question for them. So please do take that question and put it in the chat or put it in Facebook or in the Q&A here on Zoom. I'm going to introduce each one of you and ask you to introduce yourself a little bit as well. First of all, Erica Webb-Hughes is the Vice President in Pearson for Sustainability, and lots of experience in the world of education, I know. But I think it would be interesting for all of us to hear how you got here, your small steps and the impacts that you're hoping to make now. Over to you, Erica.
Hello, good morning from California. I see so many people from around the world. It's lovely to see the participants sharing where they're from and how many people are here to listen to this important conversation. Thank you for hosting it, Jane. And I'm happy to be here with you, Praveen. I came to sustainability actually as a lifelong set of small steps. I started my career in education, as you mentioned. I started as a teacher, but what I realized during that time, specifically in teaching my students and then also becoming a mother of 2 girls, that every step we take is really an impact individually and collectively on the planet and our own future and our children's future. And so I believed that every action I took needed to have more thought to it. And I would do research. I was definitely one that would spend lots of time in the library prior to Google and the tools of tech that we have today, learning about all of these things, and just had an incredible love of learning and an interest in what I can do on my part to activate myself in the decisions that I make every day. And one of the things that led me to was a Maya Angelou quote that says, when you know better, you do better. And so that quote stands in my mind day after day as when I've known and learned something new, I need to be able to behave differently. And that's how I came across this work, where I've been working in education for 20 years, doing learning, education policy, and trying to affect change in education and learning for students in the way that I could. But then at Pearson, being the world's leading learning company with a broad reach across 200 countries in the world, our ability to affect change, even from an individual or team level here, is quite larger. And so to think about impact in that way, now with the lens of sustainability and what we can do as a company in our products, in our learning materials, in our content, in the way in which we behave in those 200 countries across the world, is really something that can be measurable. And so now that's the work myself and my team are focused on today. I'm really happy to be here with you, and we'll talk more about that in a bit.
Thank you, Erica. That was great. And I've just put your quote from Maya Angelou in the chat. So if anybody wants to quickly take a note of that, it's there in the chat. Great to hear about your steps that you've taken all that time in the library. And I'm now going to ask Praveen to tell us something about his journey. Were you lots of time in the library?
I did have lots of time in the library, and I also wanted lots of time outside of the library, which is why I ended up where I am. So again, I'll start by saying thank you for everyone for joining us from across the world. It's been great. And Jane and Erica, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this. So essentially, I'm a child from the tropics. I am Malaysian. I grew up away from the cities. So I grew up very close to nature, surrounded by nature, really enjoyed nature and wanted to do nature and didn't want to do a 9-to-5 desk job. So I decided to go and pursue degrees in the environment. Unfortunately, my parents were supportive of that, let me do that. So I pursued a degree in the environment. And so this is why it's interesting, because Erica and I are working in sustainability, but we've come from very different sides. Erica started with the people, brought in the environment. I started with the environment and then started working with the people side of things as well. So things like diversity, people with disabilities, well-being, and all of that, because a lot of these things are interlinked. So that's how I've come into it. And again, this is the beauty of sustainability, because although Erica and I both came in through degrees, you don't actually need a degree to work in sustainability, right? You can learn on the job, you can do vocational courses, you can just read a lot, do short courses. So, and although I've got a degree in that, I've done all those extra things as well, because this is a ever evolving subject and people are learning all the time. So that's kind of how I got into sustainability. Now at Studios, what I do, to do that, I need to kind of give you a quick introduction to Studios. Now, if you're in the UK, households with a television pay a license fee, and that gives you access to BBC content, both on the TV and radio. If you live outside of the UK, you don't have access. And this is where Studios comes in. We're the company that helps sell this and get BBC content out across the world. The other thing we do is also we commercialize BBC content. So for example, these sort of partnerships where we partnership with Pearson and others to help use the BBC's content for educational purposes. We might also partner with people to use it for live events and experiences, or partner for merchandise, so things like toys, DVDs, clothing, all those sort of things. And we're in a global business, so we're in 40 countries across the world. And I function almost as a consultant. So I work with these different teams that do those different activities in those different offices around the world and help us make each of our product lines and event lines much more environmentally friendly. So that's what I do.
That's a great role to have, and very exciting to hear more about the workings behind the BBC and Pearson that we know for their different outputs. Now, both of you have taken that passion and that experience, that quite wide experience now, into the roles where your influence is even wider. And one of the things that we hear a lot is that, yes, individuals taking those small steps that we've described, so many people have described in the chat box, but is that enough? As individuals, we can do things, but actually, can we take those small steps far enough, or do we need big organizations, corporate organizations, businesses and governments to actually take responsibility themselves? Because it can't be just down to us as individual people. So as you both come from different large organizations, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how your organizations, Pearson, BBC Studios, are building those strategies to create or to work towards a more sustainable future. Let's hear from Erica first, and then I'll hand over to Praveen.
Thanks, Jane. You're absolutely right. Individuals, we all can do our own part. But really, as you're seeing today with all of the Earth Day events that you're likely seeing across social media today, where they're really sharing the status of where we stand today in 2021 and the impact to the planet. Or if you listen to anything David Attenborough says, you're either on one hand, you're thrilled and comforted by his voice as he shares his information, or you're terrified at the same time with the facts and figures that he's telling us about the state we're in, and that we all have to do something at this moment to really turn the tide of where we stand to create a better future. So in relation to companies, you're absolutely right. Companies have the ability to take individuals' choices and actions and put them to scale in a way that individuals cannot. So at Pearson, we have taken many steps over the last dozen years that I know from being here in making measurable steps in the way that we address our approach to sustainable action. Just this year, in March, last month, we announced the Sustainable Business Plan for 2030. And these are our steps and aspirations of what we're planning to do in the scope in which we can control to affect change. We are building sustainability engagement on 3 themes of ambitions to do better here. Because we are a learning company, we build content into our content that is on a sustainability topic, tools to learn, per se. As this largest company of education, we need to be able to equip people with skills for the job markets that are here and coming. And we anticipate growth, incredible growth in the green sector, not only specific to jobs like Praveen was talking about, where you would train specifically for jobs, but also across all job functions. There are skills and tools you can learn to embed these themes of environmental thinking and social impact thinking, of equity and access and inclusion into the day-to-day work. According to the UN, globally, up to 65 million new jobs could be generated by the transition to a low carbon economy by 2030. And if you think about that, by delivering products that Pearson does to prepare people for these roles, we are helping people to positively impact the environment and find growth opportunities for how we show up in the world and also for people to expand the opportunities they have in their life. Through these commitments, we are planning to reduce our own emissions by becoming net carbon zero by 2030. And we're practicing what we preach internally across all of our operations, our offices, our procurement and supply chain. And we are being more and more transparent to the public. This is absolutely critical. The public and our investors and the media all need to see how companies are behaving in their annual reports, what they show on their website. I'd encourage you to look at ours and demand that we all do better and show suggestions as to what those could be. We are contributing to this global movement of companies working to limit global rise in temperature as set out by the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. And we've been discussing climate change as only something we can address together, with businesses, governments, and individuals all working together to make progress in small steps, in large steps. But most importantly, especially for this audience, you're all from around the world. It's about how you can take what you learn here and elsewhere to really stand up and use your own voice to be able to ask the questions of the businesses that you contribute to and participate with and choose to spend your money with, to ask them to do better and to do more on behalf of all of us. So that's really what we're looking to do. It's a big ambition, but we absolutely believe that it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Erica. That was interesting to think, as I know I and many other people will think about lobbying government and speaking to, in the UK, our Member of Parliament about issues. But we shouldn't, as you're saying, just think about governments, but we should also maybe think about the companies that we buy from or work with or invest in, and how those companies are contributing to sustainability. I think that's a really interesting way of thinking that perhaps we don't always think along those lines. And I know, Praveen, you've got more to say about that from the perspective of the BBC. Over to you.
Yes, so I'd just like to kind of follow up on what Erica and you said as well, that really how we spend our money as consumers makes a big difference, because it's not, when we talk about telling companies what to do, we're telling it by paying them, by buying their products. So that's the easiest way of doing it. The more times people buy reusable plastic bottles, companies then will start making more plastic bottles. If you avoid buying things that are damaging, companies won't create them. So that's a very easy way of telling companies what's useful. And at the BBC, we have realized very recently that the sort of merchandise that we create, there is a demand for more sustainable types of material. And also with the programs we make, there's a lot of demand for these sort of big, high-hitting documentaries that kind of show the state of the world. Like Pearson as well, we cover the entire sustainability spectrum. So we do the people side of things as well. So I've got colleagues who work on diversity and well-being and human rights and all of that. And while I support all of them and help with some of this work, my focus is mostly around the environment. So that's what I'll talk about. At Studios, as I mentioned earlier on, we've got all these many different sort of areas that we can work in, or the sort of products that we do. And what I do is work with those different teams to help them understand what the environmental impacts are. So for example, I could go to the people who are licensing for toys and say we're doing a cuddly teddy bear. I would then look at it and say, look, it's made out of cotton. So where does the cotton come from? Is that sustainable? What packaging are you putting the toy in? Is it a cardboard box? Is it sustainable? Is it easily recyclable? Is the ink that you're printing things on sustainable? So that is one side. Or I might go to live events and say, all right, so this event is 2 days in a field somewhere. How are you managing the water? How are you managing the waste? Where is the food coming from? How are you encouraging the people who are coming to the event to travel sustainably? Are we doing all of that? So there are all these different sort of levers that I do. And this is why everyone having some sort of sustainability knowledge is really helpful, because it means that I can have a much more richer conversation and we can have a much more better product at the end of it. So for example, if we go back to the toy, me looking at it, I would look at it and think it's made out of cotton. And that's as much as I know, because I'm not a toy manufacturer and I don't know what it is. Because I've got sustainability knowledge, I've got to work with those people, and I'm sure Erica is the same as well, because those people in the departments and areas have the knowledge for that area. So if we come back to that toy, I look at it, I look at cotton. If that person who's in that department realizes that there's a sustainability element to it, they might say, actually, on the inside of it, there's a lining made out of wool. So what do we do about that? So there's that extra layer. Or I might come up and say, actually, we don't need boxes because it's cuddly toys, it's not going to break. And they might turn around and say, actually, we find that 50% of toys get damaged, so we do need boxes, but this is how we could potentially use smaller boxes or different material boxes. So see how that conversation changes. And so this is why the more people who have got some sort of basic level of sustainability, it is very helpful. So that's what we do. So I kind of work with these different teams, help them improve the sustainability credentials. We're by no means perfect, and it's something that we're learning and we're improving with each product line, each event as we go. But as the BBC, I cannot not talk about our programs, right? Because that is the main thing that everyone knows us for. And the BBC exists to inform, educate, and entertain. That's what we're meant to do. And when it comes to sustainability, our key way is these sort of documentaries, things like Blue Planet, Extinction the Facts, Climate Change the Facts. In all of that, we give you the facts, really. We kind of show this is what's happening in the world. This is why certain things are bad. This is why certain things are good. These are the sort of things people can do. But these are the facts. What do you think we should do? That's kind of what we do. And we do that in a very engaging and entertaining way without telling people, oh, you have to do this. You have to recycle. It's not about telling people what to do, but it's showing those facts. So the documentaries are one side of thing. We also have lots of other, more of the entertainment side content, right? We've got crime dramas, comedies, what else do we do? Game shows, all those sort of things. And in those sort of things, we kind of work towards normalizing sustainability behavior. So that's kind of what we do on sustainability there.
Great, that's really interesting. And I think I'm going to pick up on a comment in the chat box that reflects some of the things that you've been saying, also Erica's been saying. And this is from Carlos, who I think I may have seen earlier is in Portugal, but I'm not 100% sure. He says, if we educate environmentally committed populations, eventually they'll be part of every single organization and company all over the world. I think that's an excellent point, a really interesting one to pick up on. And I'd like to pick up that education theme alongside something that Praveen just said, which again is something that I would normally think of in a more individual capacity, which is sustainable behaviors. I think we all try to have those behaviors, but you're talking about normalizing sustainable behaviors, which implies that that's something where education and educating people can play a role. Would you like to say a little bit more about that?
Yep, I'm happy to elaborate. But before that, I'd just like to say with Carlos's point, that's absolutely true. Because ultimately, we need to not have people like Erica and me having specialist roles. So we need to be out of a job, because this is something that is part of everyone's job. Everyone thinks about it, and it's natural and normal. And that ties in with what I was saying with normalizing. So what I mean with that is we show in our dramas and our comedies and all our non-documentary content, these sort of sustainably and environmentally friendly behaviors that are out there already that people are doing. So for example, 5 years ago, if people went and bought coffee, it was usually in a disposable takeaway cup. Now, a lot of people use reusable cups, same with bottles as well. It's no longer plastic bottles, a lot of people carry reusable bottles. And so when we have a drama or a comedy, and we've got two characters walking down the street before one of them slips on a banana, for example, and they're walking around with coffee, one of them carries a reusable coffee cup. Or if you've got a car show, we show a electric car along with the standard car. Or if you've got a drama where the family is cooking dinner at home, in the corner of the kitchen, you can see that there's a regular bin and a recycling bin. Or if you've got a crime drama, one of the characters happens to be vegetarian. So these are, again, it's not as telling, oh, you have to do this because it's good for the environment. We're just showing the things that are normal, the things that people are doing, the beneficial behaviors, and just encouraging people to do it, because that is kind of where the world is moving to. So that's what I mean when I say it's normalizing. It's not the things that, super environmental people do, but it's stuff that everyone does.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I can see that that's something that, again, in the comments, people are talking about that. It's interesting to see how we can normalize behaviors that could perhaps be thought of as our own. And I work for Pearson, so Erica's looking at sustainability in my environment where I work. So I'd like to know a little bit more about how we're working towards that normalizing sustainability in our workplace.
Yeah, I think I would put this in two specific categories from Pearson's perspective. So we have our products and services, the work that we do, the things that we build, right? And then we also have our operations, the way in which we do that work. And so in operations, I would say, one of the things we focus on is our office, well, COVID aside, our office structure, when our procurement team is looking at how we're going to select locations for offices, they have a keen eye for looking for what are called in the US LEED certified buildings, which are environmentally built. They, have low carbon impact. Their setup is such that they will be as little impact possible in all areas with, low water faucets and toilets and, energy as far as lighting, automatic on and off based on motion, just those basic things. And when you multiply that over a number of offices over the course of the globe, you're creating scale of impact to reduce your carbon, right? And your water use, et cetera. That's one way. Our traditional business is books, is textbooks, right? For learning. If we're looking at the world's ability for paper and pulp to reduce that, we're cutting down 15 billion trees a year currently. And part of Pearson's work over the last 5 years is to transition from a paper-based publishing company to a much more digital, light imprint company. And so we went, I think the stats are right. We went from 70% paper, 30% digital 3 years ago to the exact opposite today in a very short amount of time, and with further steam to push towards being a fully digital learning media company that has light touch as it relates to impact. So, and that's a big lift for a company of our size. In relation to COVID, over the course of this year, back in March, when shutdowns were happening, Pearson had 24,000 people across the globe, with I think 80% of them in offices, and took the choice to say, we are transitioning all of our staff, minus a few small numbers, to homework and setting them up remotely. And so we went completely home-based within 1 week to be able to transition our entire team. And, kudos to the team to do that and to put everyone at home. And then the year that we've spent now analyzing how people can work from home, can we have a smaller office footprint and what that would do to us environmentally as a company? Could we build a more hybrid environment for working? And what are we looking at as far as impact? We're seeing a big, big difference, as are a lot of companies. We're reducing commuting, which is cars on the road. We're talking about less printing, less paper in the office, less people having to move and transit. So all of those things operationally we've looked at. If we think about our products, the normalizing behaviors Praveen talked about that I think are most critical are in the learning space. And as a little plug for Harry later, Harry will be talking about the education we're doing in a bit. So you'll learn a little bit about the courses in a bit. But overall speaking, we're looking to make sure we embed sustainability themes of environment and social justice and impact across all themes of our content, regardless of core subject area. So our BTECs now have this theme throughout. Pearson English obviously is looking at these themes and creating courses like Renewable English. We're doing that across all disciplines, because in order to really have people see that this is a normalized way of thinking and that everyone can take action in a number of areas, they have to be seeing this in every setting, right? And learning about it in every setting. So those are some of the examples we're doing.
That's amazing. And it's great to see so many different examples in different fields of education from you, from Praveen, and from everybody in the chat box also. making lots of really interesting comments here about different initiatives that are going on in schools and in education around the world. So great to see that. And I'm going to say there's a teacher in the room. We do have a teacher here, and I'm going to introduce Harry briefly in a moment. But first of all, just as a teacher, let's have a perspective on this normalizing behavior. It sounds like something you can do in the classroom. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jane. I really think that as teachers, we are kind of the original influencers. I know for a fact that when my daughter comes home from school, she'll say, oh, the teacher told me this and the teacher told me this. And it's like, but didn't I tell you that before? Yeah, but the teacher told me this. So, you know, as a teacher, we have so much, I'm not going to say power over our students, but we have influence over our students with these behaviors. And I know that back when I was working in a secondary school, I would go in and, you know, a lot of the teachers kind of called me Captain Planet and laughed at a lot of my ideas, but it was, you know, it wasn't me telling students the bad things they were doing, it was emphasizing the good things they were doing. So when a student would come in with their reusable bottle, I'd, you know, make a point and say, oh, wow, that bottle's really cool. Where did you get it from? And just draw attention to these things. So it is normalizing it, but it's also letting students know that they have that kind of sense of pride that they are doing something right. So what you're doing is normal, but it's also a really good thing to do, you know, to make sure there are recycling boxes at the front of the classroom, to make sure that if you don't need the lights on, just turn them off. Here in Spain, it gets really, really hot. But one habit the school I used to work in had was to put the air conditioning on at 8 o'clock in the morning and to turn it off at 5 o'clock at night. And it was eventually like I would go in and turn it off, but eventually I saw that the students were coming up and the students saying, do we need to have the air conditioning on? Or if we've got the air conditioning on, shouldn't we close the windows? Because we're not, you know, there's no point in cooling outside where it's 40 degrees because we're just blowing it all outside and it's a huge waste of electricity. And eventually there was a bit of a campaign, and now the school is powered entirely by solar energy, which is something that should be done everywhere here in Andalusia, obviously, because it is always sunny. He says, as the sun glares in through the window, making him sweat profusely. So yeah, it's those kind of behaviors. And as I am a teacher, I thought now would be a great time for me to give you guys some work to do. So we've got a poll set up with some of the normalizing behaviors you can do in the classroom, not just with your bottle or not just with your recycling, but also with how maybe you decide to teach a certain subject or you approach a certain subject. And here are some of the things that we can look at, some of the things that we can do. What do you do at home or in the classroom? So these are some of the ones I thought of and some of the ones I became really keen on. And we will have a poll, I believe, which should be arriving. But things like buying secondhand clothes. Oh, there we go. The poll is there. So if you'd like to vote on what are the things that you normalize in your classroom or perhaps you normalize at home. And if you can think of any others, it would be brilliant if you chuck it in the chat box. These are just, as I say, a few of the things that I thought of. The last three for me became really important, especially recently. Here in Spain, there's a real kind of, people tend to look down their noses at secondhand buying. And, you know, if you get a rip in your shirt here, well, that's it. Your shirt's gone and you have to go to the shop and buy a new one. But heaven forbid you buy secondhand because somebody else has had that. So kind of trying to re-educate these behaviors with the students was really important. And I remember in one of my classes, a boy did rip his shirt and I went off and I got the sewing kit and I said, let's fix it. And he kind of looked at me like, what's going on here? Like, you're a teacher, you're not supposed to know how to do that. And I sat there and I fixed it. And, you know, a few days later, I got a note from his mum saying, thank you so much for the help. And I was like, really, it's nothing. I'm not that good at sewing, I'll be honest. But, you know, I can sew a button on or I can sew a hole together. And these things I just found was super important. And the idea of upcycling as well. There were a lot of kids at the school who were really into dance and stuff like that. And I'd say, well, why don't you create your own outfits? You don't need to go to the shop and buy all these fancy things. You've got all these clothes. Create something, make something a bit different, you know, that way have a bit of fun together. And then the last one, re-gifting and swapping. That's something you need to be really careful with, because you need to make sure they've checked with their parents first they are allowed to swap things. But it's something I do with a lot of my friends. We have what we call disappointmas, and it's at Christmas where we give each other gifts, our old gifts, our things from at home, and we try to see how much we can disappoint our friends. And the idea of it is that we all get together, we have something to eat, we have a laugh, and the focus isn't on the presents. We can have a laugh at the presents. You know, I remember I actually gave a Pearson notebook to somebody, and they said, "You're supposed to disappoint us. This is actually incredibly useful." And I had a few of these old Pearson pens from a while back, before they made the sustainable pens. So this is another thing that we need to focus on, making sure that people don't just get obsessed with, right, I need to go renewable, going to go and get all my plastic and throw it away and start completely afresh. Don't do that. Use your old plastic. I mean, one perfect example, I'm going to show you, it's in the corner over here. I'll be 1 second. Now, these are my daughter's silkworms. And you can see they're in a huge plastic box here, but this is a huge plastic box that we had in the cellar, that we had in the basement. So we thought, what are we going to do with it? Well, it's doing nothing down there. Let's turn it into the home for our 3 silkworms. And maybe soon we'll be able to make some nice silk shirts to go with this one. I'm not sure if everybody's voted yet, so I'm going to be quiet for a moment and see. Here we go. Oh, wonderful. We've got a very high percentage of people turning off the lights when they leave the room. 74% bringing a reusable bottle. That is wonderful, really good. Re-gifting and swapping, quite low down there, I see. Hopefully that will increase. And another one there, not eating fish or meat. I find, like myself, in today's class with Renewable English, which is coming up right after this actually, we talk about consuming less animal products, consuming fewer animal products. It's something it's really difficult to kind of tell people to do or not to do, because they're like, this is my diet, don't tell me what to do. We're not telling you to do it, we're just suggesting that maybe a reduction in the meat might be a good idea. But there we go. I'll stop talking now and hand back over to Jane.
Great. Thanks so much, Harry. That was really interesting. Let's put those results back up just for a moment, because I wanted to ask, if we can, I wanted to ask Erica and Praveen if you have any comments about that, or in general about what we've been talking about, these results. Any surprises here? Anything that you want to pick up on? Praveen, you go.
Yep, sure. I was just going to say that I'm a bit suspicious about Harry's poll, simply because it seems like when he had his camera off, he was stealing answers from the Q&A and chat bit, because these are things that people were suggesting from the very start. So well done. So plagiarism there. But yes, this is not surprising. It's great to see that so many people are doing so much. Just to build on what Harry was saying, that food thing is very personal. It is very difficult. And also, I, as an environmental professional, I don't go around telling people to be vegetarian, because it is a bit like me forcing my view upon people. But what Harry said, it's about reduction. So eat it, but don't eat it as often. And don't waste, because ultimately that's kind of where we're just so used to food being cheap, and also everything being cheap at the moment. We just chuck things instead of reusing it. So the fact that there's a lot of fixing that's happening, and I suppose hopefully with food as well, we're not throwing away food, not just meat, but also regular food, that will all help. So yeah, it's great to see so much happening, and the diversity as well.
Great. What about you, Erica?
Just to pick up on that, these are all really good areas. I think it's true that there's one thing about educating and informing people about the facts of what the impact of their choices is, and letting them come to the decision of what impact they want to have is really the issue. Because proselytizing vegetarian or veganism, or the choices that you make regarding plastics or energy choices, people can feel a little bit defensive about it, because there's so many things you can do that sometimes you can feel overwhelmed by the choices that you do have. As a personal example, we at the beginning of this year, because our family has been so consumed with this discussion, especially now with the role that I have, I'm bringing home these ideas every day about what I'm learning about all of the veins of sustainability and how individuals are being able to create action. And looking around my home and feeling overwhelmed, we can change the way we eat, we can change the type of materials we bring, we can lower the Amazon boxes that come to the house that have 3 different sets of plastic and cardboard packaging layers, and how far did that have to travel to get to us? We can be overwhelmed by those things. But I think what's interesting is that you can stop and decide to make a few small steps that are what I would call low-hanging fruit, or a light lift, and try that and see if it really does change really anything about your enjoyment of your life and what you're trying to do. Then do something else, and see how that goes. Maybe boiling the ocean as a term, as a colloquial term, meaning trying to take on too much too fast all at once, is not the right approach, even though it might seem that way because of the crises we're seeing, and we're hearing all the facts about the challenges we face overall. But taking small steps is definitely the way to go, and any of these would be good as a first step.
Great.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, because I was just going to say, I completely agree. Taking all those little steps makes a difference. But the other thing to add to that is don't beat yourself up when you do something wrong. So, if you forget to take your reusable bottle once, buy the plastic bottle. It's all right. We'd much rather you have that water than not. But just remember not to do it next time. So don't beat yourself up if you get it wrong, because we will all, and it's a learning curve.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I think something that we're all learning now, because there's so much more in the media about this, is around the area of secondhand. And I admire Harry wearing his secondhand shirt. I've been wearing secondhand stuff for a long time as well, because so often you can find fantastic things and it's cheaper. And it's better for the environment. So maybe that's kind of the next step for a lot of us, in mind of the poll, which shows that fewer of us, relatively speaking, do actually think about using secondhand clothes, I'm imagining, in this context. There's also a nice comment in the chat I'd like to pick up on. Oh, Erica, do you want to say something about that?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, and one thing about always learning,
Mm-hmm.
when recently we learned about that most of the impact to carbon, supply, and water is in the production of materials,
yes.
Right? So when you think about that, if 80% of the energy we're expending is on to produce the cotton that produces the shirt that you purchase in a store, or 80% of the grain and time and water to produce, 1 kilogram of beef is, and you look at that effect, takes, thousands of gallons of water to produce that one small bit. When you know that, you can step back and say, wow, that's a big, big impact for this one small thing that I'm choosing. If I don't go to the store and buy a brand new item, then I'm reducing the supply overall of what's being produced by utilizing what's already been produced and plentiful elsewhere. And you can start making the decisions based on the facts of knowing about production. So the production reduction is important on the impact in probably the biggest way. So you make choices based on which thing you do is going to impact the largest issue that we face. That's the one thing I would just mention.
Great point. I also wanted to pick up on something I've seen in the chat, but I think it only came to us panelists. So
Okay.
I'm going to read it out because this is something that I'm going to copy and do. Karike, I hope I've pronounced your name right, says, I hate food waste. Leftovers make great lunches. We regularly have leftover buffet night at my house where everyone picks their favorite leftovers for our evening meal. Fantastic idea and so easy to implement. And thank you for bringing that into my life. Okay, now I'm going to introduce Harry properly now, because I said before, Harry's a teacher. He's not just any teacher. Harry is the founder of Renewable English, which is a resource, and I'm sure you're going to give us the link afterwards, where teachers and learners can find resources and free online lessons going towards sustainability. And he's also a trainer on the BBC, Pearson and BBC live classes, the award-winning program of live classes that we run together with our partners at the BBC. So great to have you here, Harry. And the other thing that Harry's going to do, he's going to be our sustainability learning guide in this program going forward of Let's Speak Out for Sustainability. So I wonder if you can tell us something about the program, what we're going to be looking forward to in the coming months.
Absolutely. I would love to. So, Speak Up for Sustainability, super exciting. When I was asked to come on board with this, I don't think I've ever said yes faster to anything in my life. The opportunity to get on board with Pearson and with BBC Studios to try and raise awareness, raise climate change awareness is something I was so on board with. It's what my idea was when I started Renewable English, was to raise climate change awareness and to do it through positivity and to view positive actions. Like we've mentioned beforehand, it's no use going in saying everything you're doing is terrible. So what we're trying to do is show everyone the good things that we can do. So through our learning journey, let's call it, everyone always says it's not about the destination, it's all about the journey. Well, in this case, we all want to get to this same destination of being kind of more sustainable, but our journeys are all going to take very different routes. So it's for that reason, the way we've created Speak Out for Sustainability, it's so it isn't directly, it's not linear. You know, there are bits coming in here and there. We've got 5 main themes which will come out on a monthly basis. The first one being carbon footprint. And there we go. They're popped up on the screen right on time. Absolutely perfect. So the first one's all about carbon footprint. And in that, we're going to have some BBC videos. We're going to have reading activities. We're going to have some top tips. We're going to have quizzes. We are going to have all sorts of different materials. So many materials that you'll be laughing. You'll be able to take it into your classroom and you'll be able to slot it into almost anything you're teaching. So you'll be able to do a reading activity with your class or watch a video with some wonderfully handcrafted materials to go with them. So the first unit, as I say, is carbon footprint. Then we'll move on to plastic and litter. Then reduce, reuse, recycle. We'll go a bit deeper into that because, you know, we'll look at refuse as well. And we're not only going to look at the reduce, reuse and recycle of plastic or something. We'll look at everything. You know, we were talking about clothes before. We're looking at reusing those. We were talking about food before, which is in fact the theme on Renewable English this week and next. You know, what, as Jane mentioned, you can reuse your food. You know, you can upcycle your food and you can take your leftovers, you can turn them into something better, something different. You can make them more exciting. Then we'll look at water waste and then we'll look at deforestation. Now, again, within the water waste, something Erica mentioned about your clothes. We use so much water creating the clothes, but they're the things that we don't notice. So the way that we'd like to bring this to teachers' minds and to students' minds as well, it isn't in a preachy way, but it's a way of informing people. It's a way of letting people know, okay, if you want to buy a pair of jeans, that's grand, it does take 7,000 litres of water to make that pair of jeans. It's a lot of water. So when you go into one of your high street stores and you go, oh, wow, 50% off, I can get these jeans for 10 euros. And you think, if I could spend 10 euros and get 7,000 litres of water, I'd be pretty much sorted, for about 4 years, that's enough. And if I could get it for only 10 euros, that would be great. So I'm wondering if the next time I go into one of those stores, I'd be able to do that. And what we want is for everybody to get involved. So we're going to be across all of the social medias. We're going to be everywhere. We want you to get involved, and you can see the hashtag down there. So it'd be wonderful to get involved with everything we're doing, join in with the materials, and hashtag it with Speak Out for Sustainability.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Captain Planet, I should call you. We're looking forward to welcoming teachers, educators, and also learners. So if you're a learner yourself and not a teacher, also if you're working with learners who would be interested, there will be material that learners can use independently as part of that programme. Looking forward to that, and it'll be taking place over the next few months. You'll be seeing, as Harry says, our programme on social channels. Now we've talked and talked. We've got a few minutes left, and we're going to take some of the questions that you've been posting in the question and answer and on Facebook. So let's take a look at the questions that we have here. Questions for Praveen, for Erica, and also for Harry. There's one right up the top, which is for Erica. So I'm going to go straight in with that one. It's an interesting one, and it might be that others would like to answer from their perspective as well. How does this project connect to the UN, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? I'll ask Erica to answer that first, and then if others would like to say something, please do.
Yes, absolutely. We've been connected to the UN Global Compact since its inception and have mapped which of the 17 goals that we can have the most impact on since then, and developed our ambitions and targets really tightly aligning to them. And the ones that we focus on would seem pretty obvious, I think, to folks. Number 4, which is quality education. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. And 10, reducing inequalities. So those are the 3 that we really focus on. Now, there's many, right? There's 17. So we can address bits and pieces of the rest by doing the 3 that we are really focused on ourselves. So by creating quality education, that is also then impacting number 1, which is reducing poverty, right? Because we're expecting that people will be better trained for better jobs to then make measurable progress in their lives. That's an example.
And I'd just add to that by saying that, yes, so with the education, so if we then do things like the programs, that would then show about, Blue Planet talks about pollution, talks about plastic, so talks about the water element of the Sustainable Development Goals. So a bit like Erica was saying, a lot of these are interlinked, and that's the beauty of it. So if you tackle one, inadvertently, you're going to be tackling some of the others as well, which is great.
Sorry, I was on mute. That's a first. Great. So that's a really interesting way that we can look on a high level at the United Nations Sustainability Goals. There are also a couple of questions that I'm going to put together, which is talking about first steps. We've got a question about what's a good first step in the classroom, more for Harry, and there's also what's a good first step in the workplace. I think we've talked quite a lot about the different steps in the workplace, but what would be those first steps? So I'm going to ask Harry first for the classroom, and then I'll go over to Praveen and to Erica on the workplace perhaps as well. First steps.
For me, the first step I personally took was the recycling bins at the front of the classroom. And it was also drawing kids' attention to when they brought in their snacks, the amount of plastic waste that they had. So I was drawing attention to that, and eventually, they were slowly bringing in more fruit and stuff like that, rather than a chocolate bar that was wrapped up. So the first steps, I find are the more tangible ones that they can see, particularly with younger students. And for older students, like a general global awareness of where things could go, but not in a overtly serious way, because we don't want to cause eco-anxiety. So bringing in these positive kind of ideas, these small steps that you can take, again, starting with the tangible things like plastics, like turning off lights. These small normalizing behaviors are a great place to start. From that, what I did myself in the classroom was look at whatever unit we were looking at and just have a 5 minutes at the end of the class to talk about how does this affect our planet? So, you know, if we're talking about clothes, how does this affect our planet? If we're talking about celebrations, but that's my idea.
Great. So there's some classroom ideas. What about some workplace ideas?
Oh, for me, someone else.
Yeah, I can go first. So if we talk about first steps, I would say listen, because I find that often there are people in the company who are really passionate, who really care about it. And if we just give them the platform to talk about what they think would be good ideas, because often I'm not an expert in those different areas, listening to what they have to say and giving them the chance to put in place the ideas makes a big difference. So being open to that would be useful.
Good one. Erica.
I would totally agree with that. I gave a number of workplace ideas earlier, so I won't repeat all of those. But I think to pop off what Praveen just said, using the voice of your employees to contribute and engage and give their suggestions in a way that you can collect those and put those in categories and then be able to have ideas you never would have thought of from like a program team perspective, I think is incredibly important. Also, what that does is it mobilizes your employees to really begin to act wherever they may be and to do their part in the behaviors. And when they see you pick up one of their ideas and try to share it more broadly with the company, I think that actually creates more action and more engagement. One example from Pearson I didn't mention earlier is that Pearson used to have 3 days that they would offer every employee every year to volunteer in areas that they wanted to contribute in their communities. We realized that this interest was so high that last year we made it a full week, 5 full paid days for every employee to be able to go out and act on issues that they care about, and then be able to report that activity back and share with the other employees across the company to hopefully create more action.
Lovely. That's a really nice idea as well. So this is for the enthusiasts, what we've just been describing. Now, what about, and Harry's kind of alluded to this with the term eco-anxiety, which I've written down. Those who might be feeling more anxious about this, and there is a danger that, you know, there is a lot of doom and gloom. Somebody else has also asked in a chat, an anonymous attendee, is there non-offending language that you can use to speak to family members about making their habits more sustainable? So if you're not an enthusiast, if you have a family member that you're scared, you know, that you don't want to offend, or if you have perhaps younger family members that you don't want to, you know, cause anxiety to, what are good solutions there? I'm throwing that open.
Well, one thing I did with, now, I didn't want to go to my mother-in-law's house and say to her, your bin is a disaster. You shouldn't be throwing everything in there at the same time. This is awful. So I didn't say it. I asked my 7-year-old daughter to go and say, Grandma, don't you think it would be a better idea if you separated these and, you know, you had your plastics there? So particularly for that kind of thing, I know that, you know, if I try to tell my parents to do something, they might not listen to me as much as if my daughter tries to tell me that I'm doing something wrong. I might get a bit, but when there's the grandparents involved, or the grandparents, they always listen straight away to their grandchildren. So it's a quite kind of a slightly easier way to bridge the generational gap. But yeah, by the way, I would like to add here, I do listen to what my daughter says, and I do listen to her.
Nice.
But yeah, having that kind of coming from a bit lower down in the family, from somebody younger, it really did help my mother-in-law kind of open her eyes and change a few of her behaviors at least. So that's one
nice one. Nice one. Okay, any other thoughts on eco-anxiety?
I'll touch on the one, there was one in the chat that actually mentioned my name.
Oh, okay. Yes, please do.
It was from Natalia, and it's a great question. It says, do you think that if people are working from home, they have to pay bigger bills, which miss socialization? So that gets to the anxiety about the loss of social impact in work, when I was saying that we've seen a lot of benefit from remote work. And I have to say, you're absolutely right. I mean, the social engagement piece is what we've all been missing, being stuck at home, you know, obviously with Variety the last year. And that is an absolutely critical piece of being human, is that interaction. So you're right. There is a socialization impact that we're all feeling from not being able to travel, not being able to see our colleagues, engage around the quote water cooler, for lack of a better term. But, you know, we are finding alternative ways in the meantime. You know, we're all using Zoom and other tools to see each other in a variety of ways. Obviously, we're all experiencing Zoom, I guess gloom is a good word, because we're on it so much. But, you know, if there's the light at the end of the tunnel is that this will not be permanent. We will get back to some semblance of normal where we'll be able to have those interactions in a different way that we're used to. And I think we're all looking forward to that. As far as the bigger bills, I think if you're based at home and work, you know, Pearson, if I can only speak for us, has been incredibly good about reimbursements and stipends for technology and the tools that we use at home that we would have used at work. There are also states in the US, and I think more globally, I could check on that for you, but that are actually requiring companies to provide stipends for internet use and broadband so that they can work and learn from home, because people are doing school and work at home. So there are some subsidies and benefits that are available to people that are working from home and needing to use tools that they shouldn't have to invest in themselves. So those things are available. So those impacts should be minimal. And if you think about what you're not doing, you're not commuting, you're not packing extra lunches, you're not, you know, having those other potentially eating out expenses that you wouldn't have by staying at home and, you know, just eating what's in your refrigerator. So there's a way that it kind of starts to balance. Our family has seen, you know, less use of our vehicles, less gas being used, maybe a little bit more energy in the home because we're home all day. I wouldn't say there's more laundry being done, that's for sure. I think people are very happy to be in their comfy clothes for a longer time. But those are the kinds of things I'd like to say about that anxiety about the different types of impacts we're seeing, not just environmentally, but socially as well.
And one quick point just to build on that is, you know, when people are talking about anxiety, about how bad the nature and climate can be, don't stress about the things that you can't control, because you can't control about that. Focus on the things that you can do. Don't beat yourself up when things go wrong. And that hopefully will help us reduce our anxiety a bit, because there are things we can control and there are things that we can't.
Absolutely. And that's something I'd like to add on. So like, this is something, it does become a bit of an issue in the classroom, this eco-anxiety, because traditionally in English textbooks, you have the one unit, which is about climate change. And that's all about how all the polar bears are dying. And like, suddenly you've got all the kids that are just like, what? That's awful. So what I try and do is, and what we're trying to do with Speak Out for Sustainability is show the positive examples. We're going to have inspirational teens on there. We're going to have interviews with and videos of and bios of inspirational teens, of the amazing things that young people can do with their voice. Now, we're also going to have interviews with experts. So showing the good things that we can do and the positive things that people are doing is one way to really ease that eco-anxiety and, you know, take away from, you know, oh no, everything's terrible. Well, do you know what? When you learn how to use your voice, when you learn how to speak out for sustainability, things won't be as terrible. You know, there are so many things that we can do. And as Praveen mentioned, the things that you can't do anything about, you can't do anything about that. You know, there's no use getting nervous about what's happening with with fishing nets and so on and so forth. You can't control that. But what you can control is the lights in your house. You can control whether you filled the dishwasher. You can control when you're warming the water up from the shower, that you put a bucket underneath it, and then you can use that to throw down the toilet. So that's what I
find sustainable fish. Tying back to that choice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we did have one question which I'm going to quickly pick up, and Harry will help me here, about the program, because I think it wasn't 100% clear to people how long this program is going on. This event, by the way, is 9 minutes over time, but the program itself, Harry, we have the first upcoming event on carbon footprint. What date is that, and what dates are the last events?
Yeah, the first theme will open in May, and each theme is going to go for a month. So there will be, throughout the month, there will be various materials that are going to be released onto the website. There will be videos online. There are going to be all sorts of different materials released throughout the month. So we'll have our interviews with experts. We'll have our, as I say, the focus on inspirational teens and the things that we can do. And each one will go on for a month.
For 1 month. So it's 5 themes, 5 months.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And sadly, we do have to wrap up. I know some people have had to leave us. Thank you so much for those of you who are staying on. And the last thing that I'm going to say, especially as we had that last question about the anxiety and so forth, what is it that makes you hopeful? What is it that makes you hopeful for the future? That's a lovely question, which Erica suggested, so I'm going to go to her first.
Yes, thank you. I ask this at the end of every single webinar that I conduct, because I think out of all the challenges we discuss in any webinar, it's always good to leave on what really can be good for the future. So what makes me hopeful is actually this next generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, this group of youth that is 25 and down. They are absolutely growing up, and they don't know any other way than living in a world of technology, knowing that it's critical to act on climate change, knowing that their voice matters and that they can speak up. It's our youth that is really inspiring me. I get to learn from 2 teenage girls every single day how to be a better person, how to think more about my community based on how they're thinking. And it just inspires me to behave in a different way on their behalf. And I think that's really a good lesson for all of us, is to look at this generation coming up.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll go over to Praveen now.
Yeah, I think similarly, it's about people. The amount of engagement that we're getting gives me hope. 5 years ago, I don't think hundreds of people staying on for 12 minutes extra time to look at my face would have happened. So this is great. The amount of people that are putting the effort and energy in, and in the chat, people are so engaged. I think that just gives me hope that we will solve this.
And for me, absolutely the same. It is, as you say, the future generations, but also our generations of teachers taking the mantle on to give those ideas, to share those ideas with future generations. So yeah, that's what gives me hope.
Great. So fantastic to finish on a note of hope. And thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Praveen, Erica, and Harry. And thank you, everybody from all over the world, for joining this conversation. We're looking forward to the next one, and we'll speak soon.